Am I the asshole for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she wanted me to prove I never had anything with her fiancé? I, 26 female, have always been really close with my older sister. She's 29, and in about a month, she's getting married. She's been with her fiancé for 4 years now. But here's where things get complicated. Before the two of them ever met, I actually worked with her fiancé. We worked at the same company for almost 2 years. We were friendly coworkers. We'd grab lunch with other people from the office, help each other out with work, and occasionally text about projects. That was it. Nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate, nothing even remotely close. Then, about a year later, he met my sister through mutual friends. When she found out we already knew each other, she actually laughed. She even joked, "If he ever embarrassed himself at work, you better tell me." Everything was completely normal until a few weeks ago. Out of nowhere, my sister called me, crying. She told me she'd found some old messages between me and her fiancé, messages from years before they ever met. One of them said, "I missed you today." Another had me replying, "I wish you'd come into work today." Now, I know how that sounds, but the reason those messages existed was honestly pretty boring. We worked together all the time. We helped each other with projects, covered shifts, prepared presentations together, things like that. When one of us wasn't at work, the other person usually had a much harder day. That was the entire context. Other than that, our conversations were mostly about work, random memes, office gossip, and one message where he thanked me for helping him prepare for a presentation. Nothing more. Still, my sister asked me if I'd ever had feelings for him. I told her, no, because that's the truth. I never saw him that way. I never dated him, never flirted with him, never wanted to. I figured that would be the end of it. But then she asked me something I honestly couldn't believe. She wanted me to let her go through my old phone backups and all of my social media messages. She said she wanted to see the full conversations for her own peace of mind. At first, I laughed. I genuinely thought she was joking. Then I realized she wasn't. I told her, if she was that worried, why not ask him to show his phone? After all, he's the one she's marrying, not me. But instead, she kept insisting that I hand over my phone. She said, if you've got nothing to hide, then proving it shouldn't be a problem. Apparently, some of her friends agreed. They told her it would prevent future drama. Before the wedding, I refused, immediately. Not because there's anything to hide, but because I think that's an insane invasion of privacy. My phone contains conversations with friends, family, private moments, things that have absolutely nothing to do with her fiancé. And honestly, I don't think anyone has the right to demand access to all of that. Apparently, my refusal made me look guilty, which honestly frustrated me even more. I kept asking the same question, why are you asking me instead of him? If she thinks something happened, shouldn't she be talking to the man she's about to marry? Instead, she kept asking me, why won't you just clear your name? But what name? I don't have anything to clear. I've done absolutely nothing wrong. Eventually, she told our mom, and instead of defending me, my mom said I was being too prideful over a small issue. Then, everything got worse. My sister told me she wasn't comfortable having me at the wedding unless I handed over my phone first so she could finally put this whole thing to rest. I asked her again, why won't you just ask your fiancé? And her answer honestly stunned me. She said, because I don't want him to think I don't trust him. So she doesn't want to make him feel distrusted, but she's perfectly comfortable accusing me instead. That was the moment. I was done. I told her I wouldn't be attending the wedding at all. She can have the wedding she wants without me there. And if she really wants answers, maybe she should be asking the man she's marrying instead of demanding to search the phone of the sister who's done nothing wrong. So, am I the asshole? Honestly, this feels like a pretty clear case of not the asshole. And if I'm being honest, the biggest red flag here isn't you. It's your sister's request. Refusing to hand over your phone, your private messages, and years of personal conversations doesn't make you look guilty. It makes you a person with completely reasonable boundaries. There's a huge difference between refusing to explain yourself and refusing to let someone conduct a full forensic search through your private life. You didn't dodge her questions. You explained exactly what those messages meant. You told her the conversations were about work, helping each other cover shifts, preparing presentations, sharing memes, office gossip. In other words, normal coworker stuff. What you refused, anxiety, those aren't the same thing. And honestly, the whole, if you've got nothing to hide, argument That's never been a great argument. It's a phrase people often use to pressure someone into giving up perfectly reasonable boundaries, because suddenly saying no gets treated as proof of guilt, when in reality, all it proves is that you value your privacy. Then there's something else that really stands out. Your sister wants to search your phone, but not her fiancé's. Think about that for a second. He's the person she's about to marry. He's the one whose honesty and loyalty actually matter in this situation. Yet somehow, you're the one expected to prove yourself when you suggested, why not just ask him to show his phone? Her response was, I don't want him to think I don't trust him. And honestly, that says a lot, because she's worried about damaging his trust, but she doesn't seem concerned about damaging yours. That's a pretty obvious double standard. And it makes me wonder if this was ever really about you in the first place. It sounds much more, she's more like she's struggling with insecurity in her relationship. Instead of confronting that insecurity, she's directing it toward the safer target, you, because it's easier to question your sister than the man you're about to marry. As for those messages themselves, I missed you today. I wish you came into work today. Without context, sure, someone determined to find a problem could read something into them. But with the actual context, two coworkers who regularly worked together, covered for one another, and made each other's jobs easier, those messages sound completely ordinary. Anyone who's ever had a close work friend has probably sent something similar. The problem isn't the messages, it's that once someone starts looking for evidence, almost anything can be made to look suspicious. That's called confirmation bias. When you've already decided something must be wrong, every harmless detail suddenly feels like proof. At the end of the day, trust isn't built by demanding access to someone else's phone. It's built by believing the people you love until you actually have a reason not to. And based on everything you've shared, I don't see a reason to believe you've done anything wrong. So no, you're not the asshole. You're simply refusing to sacrifice your privacy to solve a problem that doesn't actually belong to you. Am I the asshole for refusing to follow my friend's parents' house rules and leaving? For context, I'm 22, my boyfriend is 23, and we've been together since high school. Almost 6 years now, a few months ago. After I graduated, we finally moved in together. We're not officially engaged yet, but we're planning to get married once he finishes grad school. Last weekend, an old friend from high school invited us to his family's beach house for the holiday. We thought it'd just be our friend and a few people hanging out. But when we got there on Friday, we realized his parents were staying there too. Honestly, that wasn't a problem at all. It was their house, and they were actually really nice. They had their own plans during the day, we had ours, and that Friday evening, we all ended up hanging out together in the hot tub with a few drinks. They were genuinely fun to be around. Everything seemed completely normal. Then, bedtime rolled around. My boyfriend and I started getting ready to turn in, when our friend's mom quietly pulled me aside. She told me my boyfriend would have to sleep on the couch, and I'd be sleeping alone in the guest room. The reason? Because we aren't married. I'll admit, I was completely caught off guard. Nobody had mentioned this beforehand. Not our friend, not his parents, no one. I mean, my boyfriend and I literally live together, so hearing that right before bed felt incredibly awkward. I told her, okay, but inside I was uncomfortable. The thing is, I've always had trouble sleeping somewhere unfamiliar. Having my boyfriend next to me helps, and from his perspective, he wasn't exactly thrilled about spending the night on an uncomfortable couch when there was a perfectly good bed sitting empty. So, after talking it over, we decided, instead of making things awkward for everyone, we just get a hotel in town. We figured we'd meet up with everyone again the next morning, like nothing happened. When we told our friend, he seemed a little surprised, maybe even uncomfortable, but he said, okay. So we packed up, left the beach house, checked into a hotel, and thought that was the end of it. The next morning, we called him just to see what time he wanted to meet up. Instead, he sounded upset. Apparently, his parents were furious. They'd gotten angry with him for letting us leave. According to them, we didn't appreciate their hospitality. After that, the whole weekend basically fell apart. We never ended up seeing our friend again. My boyfriend and I just did our own thing around town. Then today, Monday, our friend texted us. He said he was really angry. He couldn't understand why we couldn't just sleep apart for 2 nights just to make his parents happy. Then he added one more thing. Apparently, we won't be invited to Friendsgiving this year. He hosts it every year for our old high school friend group. So now I'm left wondering, were we actually in the wrong? Should we have just stayed? followed the house rules and dealt with it, or was quietly getting a hotel the more respectful choice. So, am I the asshole? Honestly, I don't think you're the asshole, but I don't really think your friend is either. This feels less like someone doing something terrible and more like a situation where everyone was operating under completely different expectations. The biggest issue here wasn't the sleeping arrangements. It was the lack of communication. If your friend or his parents had told you ahead of time, hey, just so you know, we don't allow unmarried couples to share a room in our house, then you would have had a choice. You could have agreed to it or politely declined the invitation altogether. Instead, you didn't find out until bedtime. You were already there. Your bags were unpacked, and suddenly you were being asked to change your plans. That's an awkward position for anyone to be in. So, what did you do? You didn't argue, you didn't insult anyone, you didn't try to break their rules. You simply decided, okay, we'll stay somewhere else. Honestly, that's probably the most respectful solution you could have chosen. Now, do I think the parents are wrong for having that rule? Not really. It's their house. Some families, especially older or more religious ones, have always had a rule against unmarried couples sharing a bed under their roof. Whether people agree with it or not, they're allowed to set the rules in their own home. But having rules also means accepting that some guests might decide those rules don't work for them. And that's okay. Where things really started to go sideways was afterward. Getting upset because you chose a hotel instead of making everyone uncomfortable feels misplaced. You weren't rejecting their hospitality, you were respecting their boundaries while also respecting your own. You didn't demand they change the rules, you simply removed yourselves from the situation. That's a mature response. Honestly, if anyone deserved to be frustrated, it was probably your friend, not with you, but with the fact that this expectation was never communicated beforehand. A simple heads up could have prevented this entire situation. Instead, everyone was caught off guard, and now a misunderstanding has turned into hurt feelings, and apparently a canceled Friendsgiving invitation. That part feels like an overreaction. Disagreeing over sleeping arrangements for 2 nights shouldn't be enough to end a friendship or start excluding people from the group. At the end of the day, I don't think this was really about a hotel. It was about expectations that were never communicated until it was too late. So, no, I don't think you're the asshole. Honestly, that's about as gracefully as the situation could have been handled. Am I the asshole for refusing to exclude my non-biological son I never even knew existed? My wife, 45, and I, also 45, have 3 kids, 19, 18, and 11. My 18-year-old son, let's call him Blake, isn't biologically mine or my wife's. He's actually my best friend's son. And my best friend tragically passed away when Blake was only 7 years old. My best friend wasn't just a friend. He was like a brother to me. He was a single father. After he passed away, my wife and I were granted legal guardianship of Blake. There were a lot of reasons why, but that's not my story to tell. That's Blake's story. So I won't go into those details. What I will say is this: Blake is my son. I will always respect and honor his biological father. But Blake sees me as his dad. He sees my wife as his mom, and my other children, they see him as their brother. Things weren't always easy, but Blake has grown into an incredible young man, one that I couldn't be more proud of. Now, a little backstory. My wife and I broke up about 6 weeks after our oldest son, let's call him Danny, was born. At the time, we weren't married. The stress of becoming new parents was tearing us apart, so we separated for about a year. Even then, I never stopped being an involved father to Danny. During that breakup, when Danny was around 4 months old, I met another woman, let's call her Lily. We were never in a relationship. We met up a few times and then never spoke again. Fast forward 18 years. A young man named James contacts me. Apparently, Lily had been married the entire time, something I had absolutely no idea about. She believed her husband was James's biological father. But when James turned 18, he took an ancestry DNA test. The results didn't quite add up. He matched with me. I had taken a DNA test myself a few years earlier. Needless to say, it was a shock for everyone. But despite how confusing and unexpected this whole situation was, my wife and I welcomed James into our family with open arms. Now, I have 4 children, Danny, Blake, James, and my youngest daughter. I'm still figuring out what this father-son relationship with James looks like. After all, we missed 18 years together, but he's a wonderful young man, and I'm genuinely grateful that he's part of our lives now. However, there seems to be one problem. James has an issue with Blake. Blake doesn't even know. Honestly, I don't understand why. Earlier today, James asked if we could go on a father-son camping trip. Just me, Danny, and him. I loved the idea, especially because I know how much time we lost. But naturally, I said, of course, Blake will come too. That's when everything changed. James got frustrated. He told me, Blake doesn't have to be invited to everything. Then he said something that really hurt. He said, "It would be nice if you spent time with your actual sons, for once, without Blake." That made me angry because Blake is my son, just as much as Danny, just as much as James. So I told him either Blake comes with us or the camping trip isn't happening. Now, James is accusing me of loving Blake more than I love him. So am I the asshole? Not you. But I don't think James is really the asshole either. I think he's a hurting kid. And before deciding how to handle this, it's worth trying to understand why. Think about the world through James's eyes. For 18 years, he believed he had a father. Then, in a single moment, he discovers that man isn't his biological dad. Instead, he learns that his biological father has spent those same 18 years raising 3 other children, and one of them isn't even biologically related to him. Yet, you chose that child. James wasn't chosen. He was found. That's an incredibly painful reality to process, even if, deep down, he knows it isn't your fault. So when James asked for a father and son's camping trip, just you, Danny, and him, he probably wasn't really asking to leave Blake behind. What he was really asking was, is there any place in this family where I can have my dad to myself? The way Blake always has. Then you answered, Blake is coming too. To you, that was obvious. To James, it may have sounded like even now, Blake comes first. That's probably why his reaction was so emotional and why he lashed out in a way that wasn't fair to Blake. Here's the important part. You're absolutely right. Blake is your son. Excluding him just to make James feel better would create a different kind of injustice. It would also teach James that love is something people compete for, that if he wants more of his father's time, someone else has to lose theirs. That's not a lesson any parent wants to teach. At the same time, I gently challenge one part of your response, saying either Blake comes or the trip is canceled, before the real conversation could even begin. Because this was never really about Blake. It was about James, about 18 years, that can never be given back, about wondering whether he'll always feel like the extra son, the one trying to catch up, instead of asking who's right or who's wrong. Maybe ask something different. How do I show James that he matters? A separate, one-on-one trip, just the two of you, not as a consolation prize. Not because Blake is being replaced, but because you have 18 years to catch up on and you genuinely want to start. So, no, I don't think either of you is really the asshole. Blake absolutely belongs on that camping trip. James's words were unfair, but they didn't come from hatred. They came from grief, from confusion, and from 18 years of wondering what might have been. That's a wound worth healing, not winning. Am I the asshole for not chasing down my daughter, causing her to miss her grandmother's funeral? My daughter has ADHD and depression. Growing up, we did everything we could to support her. She was on medication, and we spent years helping her manage things. When she left for college, the transition was rough. For the first time, she was completely responsible for herself. No one was there to remind her about assignments or deadlines. During her first semester, she almost flunked out because she simply didn't turn her work in. Thankfully, she eventually figured things out. Her grades improved, and she got back on track. But one problem never changed. If you need my daughter to answer a text, good luck. Honestly, you'd probably have better luck driving 5 hours to her college than waiting for her to reply to a message. This has been an issue for years. I've chased her down before, I've called, I've texted, I've gone out of my way to reach her, and after a while, it becomes exhausting. Right now, she's staying at her college over the summer. She's taking in-person classes because she needs the credits to graduate on time after struggling during that first semester. Then, last week, my mother passed away. Her grandmother, the entire family was notified that same day. I called my daughter twice. No answer. I sent her a text explaining what had happened. It stayed unread. I asked her siblings to message her too. Nothing. No response from anyone. Now, my daughter was very close to my mom. I knew she'd want to attend the viewing. The only way for that to happen was for me to drive 5 hours to her college, pick her up, and then drive another 5 hours back. Normally, I probably would have done it, but this wasn't the first time she'd ignored every call and message. It had become a pattern. I talked it over with my wife. She was just as frustrated as I was. She said we needed to focus on saying goodbye to my mom, not spending an entire day trying to track down someone who wasn't responding to anyone. Even after making that decision, I still tried reaching her several more times. Nothing. The viewing came and went. She wasn't there. Then today, she finally read her messages. A few minutes later, my phone rang. She was devastated. Then she got angry. We ended up in a huge argument. She said I should have driven to her college anyway. She said I should have come to get her, even if she never answered my calls or texts. Now I'm sitting here wondering, was I supposed to drop everything, drive 10 hours round trip, and hope I could find her? Or after years of this exact behavior, and was it finally reasonable to stop chasing after someone who refused to answer? So, am I the asshole? Honestly, this is one of those stories where I don't think there's a clear villain. If I had to give it a verdict, it'd probably be no assholes here. And that's because I can genuinely understand both sides. From your perspective, you didn't ignore your daughter. You called her twice. You texted her. You asked her siblings to reach out. You even tried again afterward. You made a real effort to contact her. At the same time, you had just lost your own mother. You weren't dealing with a normal week. You were grieving, planning a funeral, supporting your family, and trying to hold everything together. Expecting you to spend 10 hours driving back and forth, hoping you could find your daughter somewhere on campus after she'd ignored every call and message. That's a huge ask, especially when this isn't new behavior. By your own account, she's been difficult to reach for years. You've chased her down before, you've gone out of your way before. Eventually, anyone reaches a point where they're simply exhausted. So I completely understand why this time you decided not to. That said, this wasn't an ordinary missed phone call. This wasn't about weekend plans or asking what she'd like for dinner. This was her grandmother's funeral. Once that day passes, it never comes back. She'll never get another chance to be there. And that's why I also understand her reaction. From her perspective, she isn't thinking about all the times she ignored your calls before. She's thinking about the one time when the consequences became permanent. I do wonder whether, because the stakes were so much higher this time, there might have been one last option worth considering. Maybe asking someone nearby to check on her. Maybe contacting a resident assistant if the college had one. Maybe seeing if a close friend on campus could knock on her door, not because you were obligated to, but because this wasn't just another missed text, it was an emergency. At the same time, I also recognize something important. People often imagine the perfect solution after the crisis is already over. When you're in the middle of losing your mother, you're not calmly brainstorming every possible option. You're surviving the week. And I don't think it's fair to judge someone in grief as though they had unlimited time, unlimited energy, or perfect clarity. That's why I don't really see this as a story about blame. I see it as two painful realities crashing into each other. On one side, a father who'd reached the end of his emotional rope after years of chasing down an unresponsive daughter. On the other, a daughter who now has to live with missing one final goodbye to someone she loved. Both losses are real, both feelings are understandable. If there's anything to take away from this, it's probably not about deciding who was right. It's about making sure this never happens again. Maybe your family needs a different plan for real emergencies. A backup contact, a rule that urgent calls get answered, something stronger than hoping someone eventually checks their phone. Because next time, the cost of missing that message could be even greater. So, no, I don't think either of you is really the asshole. I think this was a heartbreaking collision between your understandable burnout and her understandable grief. Sometimes, life hands people a situation where nobody wins, and this feels like one of those times. Would I be the asshole for asking my daughter's boyfriend to stop having dinner with us? I honestly don't know if I'm overreacting here or if anyone else would be just as frustrated. My daughter is 21 and she's been dating her boyfriend for about 2 years now. Things are getting pretty serious between them. He's 24, originally from Mexico, but he's lived in the US since he was about 3 years old. Now, here's where things get a little unusual. He has what seems to be a genuine phobia. He doesn't want anyone to see him eat, and I mean anyone. I've spent plenty of time around him over the last couple of years, and I've never once seen him take a single bite of food. Not once. He isn't unhealthy. He's fairly thin, but he looks perfectly fine otherwise. The problem starts whenever we all go out to eat. Every now and then, we'll invite the two of them to dinner for birthdays, holidays, or other special occasions. Every single time, he orders a full meal. A full meal. The food arrives, he cuts everything into little pieces, moves it around the plate, makes it look like he's eating. But he never actually takes a bite, not one. Then, once everyone's finished, he'll either offer the leftovers to someone else or just leave the entire meal behind. Honestly, it's even worse at our house. I'll spend hours cooking dinner for everyone. He'll happily fill his plate, sit there with the rest of us, push the food around, cut it into pieces, mix everything together, and then when dinner's over, he dumps the entire untouched plate into the trash, every single bit of it. At this point, I'm starting to get genuinely angry. It's not just the waste. Food isn't cheap anymore. Restaurant meals definitely aren't cheap. And watching an untouched plate get thrown away every single time drives me absolutely crazy. It's even become awkward in restaurants. Waiters notice. They come over asking if something's wrong. They wonder if the food wasn't cooked correctly. Sometimes they even offer to replace the meal. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there knowing exactly what's going to happen. Nothing's going to be eaten. Eventually. I talked to my daughter about it, privately. I told her, if he doesn't want to eat, that's completely fine. But please, ask him to stop ordering full meals or stop taking full plates of food at our house. Her response caught me off guard. She said, in his culture, it's considered rude not to accept food. I'm not going to ask him to refuse it. And maybe that's true. I honestly don't know. But from where I'm sitting, accepting the food only to throw every single bite away feels even ruder. It feels disrespectful, not just to the money, but to the effort that goes into making the meal in the first place. So now I'm wondering if I should simply stop inviting him to dinners altogether. Not because I dislike him, not because of his phobia, but because I can't keep watching perfectly good food and a lot of money go straight into the trash. So, would I be the asshole? This one's a little more complicated than it looks. Before deciding who's right or wrong, I think it's worth looking at why this is happening. Because honestly, what you're describing doesn't sound like someone who's simply being rude. It sounds like someone who might be struggling with something much deeper. If that's the case, then banning him from family dinners probably isn't the right answer. From your perspective, I completely understand the frustration. Food is expensive. Restaurant meals aren't cheap. Home-cooked dinners take time, effort, and money. Watching someone accept a full plate, cut the food into pieces, move it around, and then throw the entire thing away would bother a lot of people. I don't think you're wrong for feeling frustrated, but there's one part of this story that gives me pause, the pattern. This doesn't sound like someone making a choice just to be disrespectful. It sounds consistent. Every meal, every restaurant, every family dinner, even when waiters notice something is off. That kind of consistency makes me wonder if this is less about manners and more about a genuine struggle. Now, your daughter says it's cultural. Personally, I'm not convinced that's the whole story. I'm not aware of any cultural tradition that says someone should accept a full meal, pretend to eat it, and then quietly throw it away. Hospitality customs usually encourage accepting food politely, not wasting it. So I can't help wondering if that's simply the explanation he's found easier to give. Instead of talking about what's really going on, I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what that is. It could be anxiety. It could be something related to eating. Like, it could be something else entirely, only he would know. But whatever the reason, the behavior doesn't come across as someone trying to insult your family. It comes across as someone who's deeply uncomfortable. If that's true, then excluding him from dinners isn't really solving the problem. Before you go, I want your verdict. Which story do you think was not the asshole? Which one was definitely the asshole? And was there one where everyone sucked here? Drop your verdicts in the comments. I read every single one. That's all for today, and I'll see you in the next video.